Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
Let me be clear. No matter what happens to Trump or Le Pen or Nigel Farage, whether they stay true to their promises or falter, the global awakening to the tyrannical system that is globalism is unstoppable and is sweeping the world. Nationalism, free market renaissance, and the dynamic human spirit that refuses to submit is now awakening. If President Trump is trying to alienate his base of libertarian conservatives, populists, he couldn't be doing a better job. I know he's listening to Jared Kushner. It's admitted that more and more Kushner acts as the real Secretary of State and so much more. And it's clear that Kushner is a Democrat who, during the whole failed healthcare debacle, traveled out of Washington on a ski trip so he wouldn't be associated with the failure he helped engineer with Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. But let me go back to Jared Kushner in a moment. Let's talk about the facts. I know why President Trump did what he did. He's being called a Russian agent. He's being called the butt boy of Vladimir Putin. The neocons, the mainstream media, the Democrats have this endless witch hunt claiming he has connections to Russia when they're the ones that are actually up to their eyeballs in it. And, of course, you've got the communist Chinese dictator arriving last night, hours before the cruise missiles are launched, while they're at dinner. It sends a very strong message to the communist Chinese and North Korea that are constantly threatening war on the Korean Peninsula and trying to steal 90% of the South China Sea. I understand why President Trump did that. I understand the images of the dead children and all the witnesses saying that it was airplanes dropping bombs, that it's hard for the president when faced with those optics to not then do something. But the problem is he knows full well from General Flynn and others, and it even came out in mainstream news, not once, not twice, not three, but 4 times, the Al-Qaeda / al-Nusra ISIS fighters got caught launching chemical attacks inside cities and blaming them on Assad. They were so uncoordinated that they would do celebration videos showing themselves launching them. Even the UN came out and said, yes, it all pointed towards the rebels. So now President Trump had good policies of driving Al-Qaeda and ISIS out of the country into Iraq so the Iraqi forces could smash it. That made sense. I supported it. That whole war was launched 6 years ago by Obama, Hillary, John McCain, and others. They bragged that they launched the, quote, civil war, just like they overthrew the elected government of Ukraine. I don't support Assad. He's not elected. But he says that he's ready to step down as soon as the foreign Saudi Arabian and Chechen and other forces pull out. And so Trump was pushing them out, had a deal with Russia. Our military had a deal with Russia going back 4 years to coordinate strikes to defeat the bad guys, the radical Islamicists, and then Assad would step down. Assad agreed to give up his chemical weapons. They were being stored at these airfields under Russian control. And so Trump called up the Russians and said, I'm going to destroy these airfields. You've already agreed to get rid of the chemical weapons. They're sitting there. I'm going to destroy them. And the Russians clearly understood that Trump needed that so that he wouldn't look like he was in their hip pocket, but also so that he wouldn't himself end up looking soft on the chemical attack, which was clearly a false flag. But Trump understands the general public doesn't have a memory and doesn't know that. So from a Machiavellian view, I understand exactly what President Trump did. This can easily escalate into a larger war with the Russians. They've put a warship there now in front of our missile cruisers and say, if you fire any more Tomahawks, we're going to shoot them down. That's the Daily Mail. The Russians have announced that. It doesn't matter if the U.S. warned the Russians at the air base to get out ahead of the strikes. It still is a clear provocation. Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, has come out and said, we no longer see any place for Assad in a new regime. Because before, they were going to have a new parliamentary system, and then Assad could lead a party in elections and still be part of the system. Now they're saying, you've got to leave, breaking the original deal from 4 years ago. We're talking about incredible brinksmanship here. Bombing a military base and giving the Russians just a few hours notice to get out. What if they hadn't have left? And again, that's a message being sent to North Korea and China. And this is all being done in a region that our own government, along with NATO, went in and destabilized on purpose. That's why 4 years ago, the UK, for the first time in modern history, voted against the United States and said, we are not for sending in troops or bombing Syria because they didn't start the war and the Al-Qaeda, ISIS forces are 10 times worse than them. We are against this. We do not back the United States. That is unprecedented because our own military was saying it was wrong. So I'll tell President Trump this. If you start focusing your forces on Assad's forces that are battling rebels who are all radicals, all Wahhabists, all scum of the earth, and if you actually try to give them their own Islamic state in some type of armistice or some type of ceasefire agreement, it is going to absolutely go back on everything you said and going to mean that your entire base will be forced to turn against you. Already, Paul Watson has tweeted that he's now off the Trump train. And that's a sad thing because on TPP and the economy and $3 trillion in the stock market and building a border wall and cutting back these regulations, Trump is helping America. Trump is helping the average person. And Trump's got to know the elite are never going to back off of him. They're never going to be nice to him, no matter what he capitulates to with them, because they have to destroy the idea of a nationalist. They have to destroy the idea of a country existing on its own and of free market capitalism, because globalist collectivism cannot compete with that. Senator Rand Paul has rightly come out and said, you can't do this without congressional approval. We see Nigel Farage coming out and saying, I like Trump, I still support him, but how far is this war going to go? And Rex Tillerson says it may go all the way into Damascus, and tens of thousands of U.S. troops are now massing already inside the country. A ground war has already begun. So now we know why 2 days ago Stephen Bannon was taken off the national security team, because he told the president, rightly so, this is a civil war that our own government started. We need to help end it. And we certainly don't need to go to war with the main government force in Syria that is not the aggressor. Let's go over some of the history of this if you're a new viewer or listener. Seymour Hersh says Hillary approved sending Libya sarin and giving it to the Syrian rebels. Remember that? In January, Susan Rice assured NPR the Obama administration removed chemical weapons from Syria. Syria gives up chemical weapons, but a war rages on. And again, the Russians were containing them at that base and others, and there's no proof that an attack was launched from there. And as Ron Paul has come out and said, clearly, this is a false flag.
So Assad, they claim, now went and released gas to kill a bunch of people. But, Daniel, we might not have much of a job here today because I looked at the New York Times to find out, to get the explanation, and they said, worst chemical attack in years in Syria. U.S. blames Assad. So it's all over and done with. But not quite so easy, is it? What happened 4 years ago in 2013, this whole thing about crossing the red line, and ever since then, the neocons have been yelling and screaming. Even part of the administration is still yelling and screaming about Assad using poison gases on his people 4 years ago. Not quite true.
Yeah, it was never proven, in fact. And the UN official Carla Del Ponte said that attack was most likely done by the rebels based on the evidence. But here you have Nikki Haley, U.S. ambassador to the UN, almost as we speak, literally at the UN Security Council, saying, quote, "We know Assad has used chemical weapons before." It's not true. It has never been proven that he has. He may have. We do know that the rebels have used them. That has been proven.
And who would benefit? It makes no sense, even if you were totally separate from this and take no sides of this, and you were just an analyst. It doesn't make any sense for Assad under these conditions to all of a sudden use poison gases. It's zero. I think it's zero chance that he would have done this, deliberately, and he's doing this now.
Now, again, here's where Jared Kushner comes in, because we know from our sources he's been attacking Bannon for months behind the scenes, feeding information to the Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough, leaking info to position basically a Democratic Party / Goldman Sachs takeover of the White House. And now Jared Kushner's best buddy, one of the former leaders of Goldman Sachs, is the person they're saying maybe the new chief of staff replacing Priebus. So someone even worse than Priebus. I mean, that sounds extremely treacherous towards the president. And I don't know how the president can't see that's happening. But I understand how sometimes you let family take advantage of you. But I tell you, Donald Trump needs to break the trance that Jared Kushner and others have over him if he actually wants to make America great again. And finally, the headlines scream out everywhere. The world is on the verge of World War III. If Trump continues to press and attacks Russian forces, they have said that they will respond conventionally, and then very quickly that could escalate. And as Michael Savage and others have come out and said, do we really want to have war with Russia? The headlines are clear. World War III fears. Russia threatened Donald Trump with negative consequences if he strikes Syria. World War III fears. Kim Jong-un declares he's on the brink of war with U.S. as Donald Trump is urged to assassinate North Korean despot. Things are spiraling out of control right now. And you look at those warmongering neocons and Democrats and people like Nancy Pelosi doesn't even know who the president is, and Maxine Waters thinks Putin invaded Korea. This is the stuff that World War III and mass death is written of. Everybody should be praying for an awakening. Everybody should be praying for the political parties to stop attacking Trump and trying to push him into war. Everybody should be praying that Jared Kushner quits trying to play the part of the president behind the scenes as he maneuvers his father-in-law towards political destruction, only hoping later he can be president. I assure you, Kushner, your name is now bound to Trump. And if Trump falls and if America fails, you and others will be held responsible. Meanwhile, the mass Stockholm syndrome continues, literally. Here's the Daily Mail and BBC. Terror in Sweden. At least 5 people dead after truck crashes into a group of pedestrians in Stockholm shopping center and gunman opens fire. But of course, it's not Islamic, even though the Islamicists have called for this, and we're seeing weekly attacks in Europe. Stockholm incident. Lorry rams people. And of course, you read it out of BBC, they won't even imply that Muslims were involved because that's taboo. And of course, Sweden is officially the rape capital of Europe, just as Nigel Farage said. And now they're looking at arresting him, just like they've already indicted Le Pen for criticizing Islam. Now, why do I raise this? If you look at the map, you've got Iraq, you've got Syria, you've got Turkey, the gateway to Europe. And you've got the dictator of Turkey threatening jihad in Europe if they don't open their borders up further and take in more Muslims. He's now allied himself with Saudi Arabia and these different al-Qaeda groups. And so if Syria completely falls to the Wahhabist radical form of Islam, there will be an open conduit 10 times, 20 times, who knows, worse than what we've already seen with the 5 million Islamic refugees flooding into Europe and now into the United States and Canada. So what we're witnessing is an Islamic invasion run by Saudi Arabia, launched by the neocons and the Democrats 6 years ago, now coming to a head with our own military in the last 5 years trying to block this, trying to stop this Islamic jihad, trying to block this Sunni takeover, trying to contain it into just a Muslim civil war. And you have Trump's advisors clearly trying to manipulate him and trick him into this move in a way of silencing his critics that claim he's a Russian agent. That's never going to silence his critics. He's being praised right now by some of the top neocons that now he's finally president. And every time he does what they say, they'll pat him on the head and say, you're now the president, until they're ready, just like Nixon, to set him up and destroy him because they want to destroy that image in front of the American people. But before they destroy the image of an American renaissance and resurrection, they first must destroy Trump in the eyes of his base. And that process is now accelerating as we speak. As I said at the start, globalism is in deep trouble. It's collapsing on a planetary scale. So, if Trump doesn't stay true or gets overwhelmed, or if Nigel Farage goes sideways, or if Marie Le Pen gets assassinated, God forbid, whatever happens, we're beginning to win. The tide's turning because the public is aware of the unelected authoritarian globalist system. And that's what's so exciting. So we're living in a very, very positive time for human awakening and innovation. We're also living in a very, very dangerous time as corrupt old authoritarian regimes like Goldman Sachs, Communist China, and others realize that their power is coming to an end. That's why Juncker, the unelected head of the EU, is threatening war. That's why China's threatening war. It's why North Korea is threatening war. It's why the neocons and the establishment Democrats want war, because that's all they know. We're witnessing the death throes of the old colonial crony capitalist system. If we can survive those death throes, a true golden era, a true renaissance of life extension and space exploration and so much more is lying in front of us. This planet's beautiful and wonderful, but we're trapped on it. And if you look at the technology we have compared to 1,000 years ago, we're like gods compared to what our ancestors had. Think of what we're going to have in 100 years, in 200 years, if we don't destroy ourselves. As the Bible says, the eye has not seen, the ear has not heard the things God has in store with us. So, in the final equation, pray to God, pray to Christ for enlightenment, for awakening, and for peace. I'm Alex Jones. This is the InfoWar. Now back to David Knight, who's hosting live. This is one of the biggest secrets out there. The missing link of why our ancestors, whether you were in Africa or ancient Albion, which is England today, why our ancestors were so much stronger. I mean, there are huge archaeological reports, all sorts of anthropology studies, you can look them up for yourself, that show that humans, just an average farmer of 10,000 years ago in England, was stronger than Olympic athletes today. In the final equation, everyone knows our modern society has lost its vitality. The sperm counts are down like 90%. People are falling apart. They're totally depressed. They're unhappy. What is going on? Every ancient culture was obsessed with what I'm about to reveal to you. Today we call it bone broth, and for thousands of years our ancestors enjoyed its benefits before it became lost to our modern diets of processed junk. That's why I'm so excited to announce the product that is undoubtedly the jewel in the crown of InfoWars Life products. Caveman. We lost our vitality because we just ignored the ancient traditions. Everyone knew that you used all the parts of the animal. You used the skin to cover yourself or for shelter. You used the meat for sustenance, the fat for cooking, but you used the bones for strength. We are now introducing Caveman by InfoWarsLife.com, the ultimate in true paleo nutrition with bone broth, turmeric root, chaga mushroom, and 7 total primal superfoods in a single great tasting formula. The bone is so amazing. From the outside structure full of minerals and key cofactors to the marrow that produces the blood for the body. This is the engine of the life essence. I've made a lot of important points here, but this is the one you need to research for yourself because it's so key. High-quality bone broth helps support healthy muscles and connective tissue, while the active compounds in turmeric do battle on the cellular level and help fight free radicals. And collagen is essential to aid healthy tendons, ligaments, and muscle tissue. This is an absolute win-win. You get an amazing product produced right here in America. You support InfoWars and all we're doing to promote freedom and the restoration of our republic and promotion of freedom worldwide. The journey towards better health and giving our bodies these amazing compounds that God created starts at InfoWarsLife.com. 3 years in the making, incredible research, and the very best ingredients. I'm Alex Jones, and I may not be a caveman, but compared to these trendies out there in the street, I'm as close as it gets. Join me at InfoWarsLife.com and get your caveman formula today.